I drink a lot. I don't drink alcohol of any kind, not even wine, but I try to drink more water than ever. And every day I drink coffee. I have long days and coffee really helps. Recently I've even learned to distinguish between good coffee from not so good coffee. And I started to think about coffee in a historical way because of one of my favorite books. It's called The Coffee Trader by David Liss. It's the story of a Jewish man in Amsterdam in the 17th century. And the novel tells the story about coffee coming to Amsterdam. And it's like the whole city wakes up. People talk more, they have more energy, and sometimes when I drink coffee as I'm getting draggy in the afternoon, I think about Amsterdam waking up. And so I read a serious book by a historian, Robert Lieberlis. It's called Jews Welcome Coffee, Tradition and Innovation in Early Modern Germany. The historian starts by talking about drinking liquids in early modern Europe. You couldn't drink water because it was contaminated and it spread disease. Water was actually the greatest killer in the 1700s. People were trying to figure out what they could drink and stay healthy. The effects of tea and coffee and even chocolate were still medically mysterious in the mid-1700s. As society tried to figure out coffee, Judaism needed to figure out where coffee fit in its system of life. Judaism always adapts and adopts. It adapts to and adopts the best new developments. So the rabbis thought long and hard about coffee. They knew immediately that coffee did not violate Jewish law because it was not a forbidden food. And while Jewish law prohibits anything that's bad for you and goes against the best interests of society, coffee was not prohibited for any reason. So coffee was accepted as kosher from the very beginning. And then the question became, where does coffee fit in our religion? We Jewish people love life, and we appreciate the gifts we are given by this wonderful world that God created. And we express our happiness and gratitude by saying blessings, brachot. Different food types require different blessings. So the new charming question was, what blessing should we say over coffee? Since coffee grows from the ground, some authorities said that the bracha should be, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri ha'adamah. Blessed art thou, Lord our God, who creates the fruits of the earth. This bracha is for fruits and vegetables that grow from the ground, like potatoes and watermelon and bananas and strawberries. So we should say, these rabbis said, Borei pri ha'adamah, blessed art thou who creates the fruit of the ground for coffee. But other authorities said, this is Judaism. Other authorities said, you're right, coffee beans come from the ground, but people are thinking about coffee like they're thinking about tea and beer, that also are substances that are mixed with water for drinking. And since tea and beer are drunk with the blessing, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyeh bidvaro, blessed art thou, O Lord our God, by whose word all things exist, thanking God for creating all things, analogy makes it simpler to say that bracha for coffee too. So Jewish people took coffee and made it their own, as Jewish as a Maxwell House Haggadah. So Rabbi, why are you talking about Jewish people adopting coffee hundreds of years ago? Because I'm thinking about how coffee wakes us up. And I'm thinking about the shofar in Rosh Hashanah and the poem that says, awake you sleepers, tikiyah. I'm thinking about how we can drag ourselves through life, only thinking about ourselves, totally oblivious to the people around us, what they're going through, how they're discriminated against, how they face prejudice. We respond quickly and effectively when confronted by anti-Semitism, but are we awake to all the forms of overt and hidden prejudice in our community and our society? Are the events of this year, including the senseless murders that have shocked us so badly, going to serve as a persistent cup of strong coffee? Are we going to wake up and are we going to stay awake? Will we learn to make this awakening part of our lives this awakening part of our lives, integrating the lessons of this painful year into our lives, turning the pain into a blessing. Just as we thank God for every fruit and bean, will we thank God for this opportunity to change our minds and to act differently? So here's a cup of coffee. A black baby boy born today in Washington, D.C., Missouri, Alabama, Mississippi, or a number of other states has a shorter life expectancy than a baby born in Bangladesh or India. Here's another cup of coffee. Blacks died from the coronavirus at more than twice the rate of whites. A result of the recent mass layoffs were that fewer than half of American adults had a job. In 1968, shortly before he was cruelly assassinated, Bobby Kennedy said, "There's another kind of violence, slower but just as deadly, destructive as the shot or the bomb in the night. This is the violence of institutions, indifference and inaction and slow decay. This is the violence that affects the poor, that poisons relations between men because their skin has different colors. This is a slow destruction of a child by hunger and schools without books and homes without heat." Kennedy's reference to hunger reminds me that 1 out of 6 Americans right now experience hunger. At the same time, we throw away a pound of food per person per day in this country, or well over 100 billion pounds of food per year. And yes, this virus is a horrible health crisis, but so is racism, and so is prejudice, and so is hunger. And the truth is that we all have prejudice and bias. Research shows that there's a lot of hidden prejudice that we even hide from ourselves. Let me give you some quick examples of hidden prejudice. When you hear the slogan, "Black Lives Matter," don't you hear yourself say, "Yeah, but all lives matter"? What you're ignoring is the pain that would make someone feel that they need to say, "Black Lives Matter." The pain of living in a society that does seem to have a huge double standard on all sorts of issues. And yes, I want to say, "Hey world, what about Jewish lives?" I say this with agony. And I know that I'm going to catch it for this remark, but I wanted to distinguish between saying in pain, "Black Lives Matter," and individuals and groups associated with the Black Lives Matter movement who don't care about the lives of Israelis and falsely accuse Israel of genocide and apartheid. But despite those misgivings, this cannot stop me from saying that Black Lives Matter, because if I truly value human life, I have to value even those lives that disagree with me or disparage me. I have to value all life, black and white and Jewish and Muslim. I must value all lives, even if others do not value mine. Now, one of the great things about being the rabbi of this intelligent congregation is that people hear me talking about a subject and give me things to read or watch or listen to. So my friend Paul Fortgang turned me on to the Civil War podcast, a brilliant, careful reconstruction of how and why the Civil War happened. And as I was drinking the coffee of this painful year and listening to these shows about slavery as the issue that caused the Civil War, I woke up one day with a very basic thought. Where was the white slavery? Slavery was considered okay because it was about buying and selling blacks. Black lives were not considered equal to white lives because many thought that it was okay to enslave them in the interest of economic wealth for their white owners. And here was another cup of coffee, this one given to me by my friend Phil Kuchik. He reminded me of the old Star Trek episode called "Let That Be Your Last Battlefield." So in this episode, the Federation Starship Enterprise picks up Lokai, whose most striking feature is that his skin is ink black on one side and chalk white on the other side. And chasing him is a character named Bele, played, by the way, by Frank Gorshin, yes, the Riddler. Bele is also colored black and white, similar to Lokai, except the black and white sides are reversed. And Bele explains that he's been chasing Lokai for 50,000 Earth years. And the two begin to argue about the history of their peoples. The source of this conflict is, again, that Bele's people are black on the right side, while Lokai's people are all white on their right sides. And the distinction is lost on the ship's officers. They just don't get what the issue is. So they decide to take the two back to their planet. But when the ship arrives, Spock can find no signs of intelligent life. Lokai and Bele realize that they are the only ones left of their peoples who have completely annihilated each other in a civil war. And so they attack each other. And Lokai breaks away, and Bele pursues him, and they beam down to the planet, and the bridge crew just shake their heads, sadly, about their unwillingness to give up their hate. How ridiculous hatred is about skin color is. So let's be open. There will always be prejudice, and some of it is deep and destructive and divisive for our country, and some of it is just stupid. It's just stupid. So I want to give you a quick, trivial, personal story about stupid prejudice. I have a lot of bosses in my life, but maybe number one is my granddaughter, Leah. My granddaughter, Leah, controls me. I am putty in her hands. And one day, I needed to get her to go to dance class, and she didn't want to go, and so she made me bribe her. She wanted a doll. So like the most ridiculous, spoiling, pandering grandparent, I dropped her at the dance class, and I ran to the store to buy a doll. And people were staring at me. I went to the register, and the cashier looked at me and said, "Did you find what you wanted?" I said, "Yes." I ran back to the class, and I was ready with the doll when Leah got out, and she loved the doll, and she said it was beautiful, and she started mothering it. And a couple of days later, my daughter Rachel told me how much Leah loved the new doll, and I said, "I will never buy a doll again. People think I'm some kind of creep." I told her about all the people asking me questions and staring at me. And she said, "Abba, they don't think you're a creep. They're racist." And I didn't know what she was talking about. And I looked at the doll, and I finally got it. It had dark skin. I didn't see it. Leah didn't see it. Rachel had to look twice in order to get it. But the white customers saw it. The white cashier saw it. This is just plain old stupidity. I know it's a trivial example, but it reminded me of what we're up against. It's just ridiculous prejudice, like on the Starship Enterprise, because you have white on one side and black on the other side. It's like the Civil War podcast reminded me a lot of people believed that blacks were inferior and should be slaves for their own good. It's like the Star Trek episode where any kind of difference in skin color can lead to hatred. We have to drink the coffee and wake up to all forms of prejudice. And this year, a lot of us woke up to another form of prejudice. The Me Too movement, sometimes called the Time's Up movement, has taught us painfully how females are harassed and discriminated against. Did we know this? Sure, but a lot of us heard it with our eyes closed. We needed a strong cup of coffee. We needed to be hit over the head to see how prevalent the system of harassment and muzzling the victims into silence has always been. No human being should have power over another human being. We're not talking about slavery anymore, but people can find themselves in a position where to speak up can mean to lose their livelihood, to lose their careers, where to make waves can drown you. Okay, so some survivors have shared their stories, and some powerful men have lost their jobs, but at a broader social level, is anything really different? My conclusion is that there is some real progress. States are banning non-disclosure agreements that cover harassment. States are introducing protections for more workers. The Time's Up Legal Defense Fund has helped thousands of people seek justice. Some survivors are getting financial restitution. The non-tipping minimum wage for food service has been raised so that waitresses don't have to endure harassment just to make a living off their tips. But most of all, many Americans have changed how they think about power. And one of the biggest effects of the Me Too movement has been to show Americans how widespread assault and harassment really are. As more and more survivors spoke out, they learned that they were not alone. And people who've never had cause to think about harassment before suddenly saw how much it has affected their coworkers and children and parents and friends. Americans are thinking more than ever about power. Who has it? Who doesn't? And how those with more power are trying to control those with less. Me Too has been a driving force behind this change. Now, when I just listed some of those laws that are changing, some of you were bored. We don't want to hear it. But law is what it's all about. We need very specific and detailed laws. It would be nice if we all loved our neighbors as ourselves. But many of us have neighbors that we don't love or even like. Judaism says, we don't care if you love your neighbor. You have to follow the law, and you have to do the right thing by your neighbor. You must respect her property. You must respect her person. You must help them in time of need. Love shmuv, Judaism says. Do the right thing. And it's only through the law that we can assure the rights of everyone. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, may she rest in peace, understood this better than anybody, maybe anybody in our country. She was a great hero of working through the law to make changes for every human being. It's not just that she was a woman working for women's rights. Whoever needed it, she was trying to help. She should be our hero. And that she's Jewish makes me proud beyond anything. Now, I get upset when I hear that all police are being branded as prejudiced or as murderers. You and I know plenty of police people who serve our community with dignity and respect for everybody's rights. When I hear defund the police, I get a shiver. I think this is a simplistic solution to complex problems. But I recognize that the police are the enforcers of the law, and they must be held to a high standard so that the law is respected. And this is why I get enraged when anybody thinks that they're above the law. The Supreme Court, God help us, the Supreme Court said, no citizen, even the president, is categorically above the common duty to produce evidence when called upon in a criminal proceeding. No president, no policeman, no boss, no prejudiced homeowner is above anybody else. And that's why we need specific laws. I believe in law. If a statue represents hatred, go through the legal steps so that it will be taken down through a legal process. Mob rule scares me, even when I agree with the mob. Stay nonviolent. Even just strategically, nonviolence wins and gains sympathy from all good people. Violence only begets more violence. Laws must protect us from hatred, but they must be changed through the right, peaceful, legal process. We may not stop people from their ignorant hatred, but we can protect those who have been victims of hatred through the law. I believe in America. Even with everything that's going on, I believe in America. I know this has been a terribly tough year, and I know that we have seen the dark underside of people, but I continue to believe in America. The best part of drinking coffee is waking up. We say the bracha, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam she'hakol niyeh b'dvaro. Blessed art thou, Lord our God, who creates everything and who creates everybody, all equal in God's eyes. The worst part of waking up is realizing how much we have to do today. But the best part of waking up is that we now know what we have to do today. We can do better, and we will.